I've talked a few times on here about the difference between rhetoric and reality, and we seem to be looking at this in the EU UK reset as well. Not least, of course, in all this. There's a lot of publicity today about Octopus Energy offering £200, £760 was one headline that I saw in New York, oddly. And I think, where does all this come from? Because I subscribe to Octopus, or Octopus control my electricity and gas. I've had no letters or emails offering me any sort of discount. So all of this again is the rhetoric over the reality. You know, anything for a good headline, and it seems to be the direction that we're going. We find ourselves navigating, for example, the choppy waters of post-Brexit diplomacy, where legal disputes, political rhetoric, economic pragmatism are all sort of jumbled up like spaghetti. And Keir Starmer's ambition to reset the UK-EU relations has heralded an essential step in mending a fractious divorce. Yet, as James O'Brien astutely observes, it's a tightrope walk, balancing the need for economic realism against the pull of political posturing in the middle of sabotage from what he calls the right-wing media. Brussels' decision to haul the UK to the European Court of Justice, the ECJ, on two cases is a pointed reminder that the past is far from settled. These cases concerning the rights of EU citizens and bilateral investment deals casts a long shadow over Starmer's overtures of goodwill. The timing is no coincidence. The ECJ's jurisdiction over Brexit-era issues lapses on December the 31st, and the optics of legal action are hardly conducive to Starmer's desire for a clean slate. Yet, as the European Commission insists, the UK has unresolved obligations under the withdrawal agreement, obligations tied to the fair treatment of over 5 million EU citizens. And Starmer's pledge to put Brexit rancor behind us is noble but fraught. His rhetoric of pragmatic leadership contrasts sharply with the Conservative accusation that Labour seeks to surrender sovereignty. Priti Patel, never one to mince words, never really quite clear about what she's trying to say, warns of creeping EU jurisdiction under Starmer's leadership. Well, it might be useful to have somebody in charge, don't you think? Yet Starmer's refusal to entertain a return to freedom of movement or the single market has already disappointed many within his own ranks. His critics accuse him of being neither sufficiently bold nor sufficiently defiant. Chancellor Rachel Reeves' recent meeting with EU finance ministers highlights the economic rationale for rapprochement. British businesses are struggling under huge regulatory burdens, as the British Chambers of Commerce warns. From horticulture to chilled food, sectors are desperate for a reduction in border friction. The music industry, worth £7.6 billion annually, remains hamstrung by Brexit-era bureaucracy. A bespoke UK-EU deal on cultural touring, veterinary standards, and trusted trader schemes could unlock significant growth. But here's the rub. Economic alignment with the EU invariably raises questions about the UK's regulatory sovereignty. While Reeves avoids the phrase dynamic alignment, the application and the implication is clear. Better access requires compromise and alignment. The balance is precarious if you want to please two completely different sides, especially with the spectre of Donald Trump's protectionist policies looming over US-UK trade negotiations. Starmer's efforts face relentless sabotage from both the right-wing media, who pounce on every gesture of cooperation as a betrayal of Brexit, and the narrative is simple and incendiary. Labour, they argue, is dragging Britain back into the EU's orbit, undermining sovereignty for mere crumbs from Brussels' table. And this rhetoric, while detached from the economic realities of Brexit, resonates with those for whom sovereignty was the referendum's clarion call. So can Starmer succeed? The EU plays hard to get. The Brexiteers simply never shut up. The EU's overtures, a youth experience scheme, and talks on extending the fisheries deal indicate willingness for cooperation, but veterans of the Brexit battles within the EU are wary of reopening old wounds. And meanwhile, sectors such as horticulture and farming plead for urgent action. The National Farmers Union, warns that ongoing bans on key exports like seed potatoes are crippling the industry just as much as Rachel Reeves is crippling the industry. These workers are on their knees. Rebuilding trust, as the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey observes, is essential, but trust building takes time, diplomacy and a deft touch, qualities Starmer will need in abundance if he's to traverse this tightrope without falling into the chasm of public disillusion or political backlash. Starmer's challenge is to chart a course between economic necessity and political perception, and his success depends not only on forging pragmatic agreements with the EU, but also on convincing the British public, and indeed his political opponents, that such agreements are in their interest. And now the tightrope remains taut, the stakes are high, the saboteurs ever vigilant, and whether Starmer can maintain his balance may well define his tenure as Prime Minister. You think Barnum, you think Michael Crawford, you think whoops-a-daisy.